Recording. Recording is in progress, everyone. So, the quote that I'm talking about in reference to the beautiful screen that we're seeing for Thai that relates to our practice today, relates to the discussion today, is this Thich Nhat Hanh quote, which I think many of us have heard, and I thought it would be in keeping with the talk 2 weeks ago, which was a Thich Nhat Hanh poem. So he says, feelings, and we can also say thoughts, feelings and thoughts come and go like clouds in a windy sky. Conscious breathing is my anchor. Conscious breathing is my anchor. So we can begin as we always begin, just getting physically settled in our seat, allowing ourselves to feel the weight of our body. One component of our humanity is the weight of our body. We can just soften and let this happen. We can let gravity pull us downwards. Letting it pull as if from the tailbone. And softening our muscles in the hips and lower belly and back and shoulders to make that more possible. And from that place of gravity pulling us down by the tailbone, just giving in to that, we also have a little tension of feeling as though our head and the top of our head is moving away, not with a lot of tension, just a little slight sprouting upwards out of this rooted tailbone. So we feel these two poles of the tailbone, the base of the spine, and the top of the head. Two poles of our body. And in between the two poles, we feel the breath. We feel the breath however it is today. Embracing it the way it is now. Maybe it feels thick and like not a lot of air is coming in, or maybe it feels like we can't pull enough air in. It could feel very smooth and easy, or not so at all. Slow or fast. However it is, letting it guide itself. Letting your breath dictate when it needs to be breathed. In other words, breathe when you feel like it, and just notice yourself breathing when you feel like it. having waited long enough, whether we liked it or not, we probably noticed that we also have the thoughts going on internally, as we're all aware of. We've practiced before. We know these thoughts will come, whatever they are today. We might have feelings. They might just be feelings in the body, the pumping heart, tightness or aching somewhere. Or they could be more emotional feelings thinking about different parts of the day or the next day. So all of these come up. Our practice today is really simple. Let's just count breaths. So on the inhale, we count 1. On the exhale, also count 1. We let it extend for most of the breath. So inhaling is 1. And exhaling the same way. 1. Next breath is 2 and 2, and 3 and 3, and so forth. We'll count up to 10, starting again at 1 when we get to 10 or when we get lost. Very simple instruction. One of the first things to notice is the quality of mind as you count. Are you rushing to get to 10? Are you stressing about making sure that no thoughts distract you? If so, you can just soften a little bit. Care a little bit less about whether thoughts come. Be unbothered by those. Slow down a little bit more and savor the count to 10, because you know it's just going to start again from 1 once you get there. And you don't get any points for getting to 10. Have you forgotten that your breath is happening in a body? If so, you can just check back in with how you're sitting. You're still letting gravity pull you. Still feel your head and your tailbone separate. We can notice a couple things from here as we just continue to count. You might notice boredom, very common. There's very few things as boring as just counting to 10 repeatedly over and over. Noticing if that's an experience that's happening and just touching in with how you know where you're feeling that. Another thing to check in with is my mind getting hazier, so not counting as clearly. Nothing wrong with that, but we can see if we can course correct and just be a little more interested in what this next breath is going to be like. You might be curious if the count is starting to take on a sort of force of its own. This might not be happening if we're still settling and still trying to be convinced by the fact that this is worthwhile. But if we are convinced, we might notice the count kind of handles itself, and it can open our mind up to doing other things while we're counting. That might be wandering, or it might be intentionally noticing the room and the body as we continue to count the breath. So let's see if we can do that a little bit, continuing to keep this count of the breath, but also noticing, how does the rest of my body feel? What do I hear or sense in the room? Where? What's it like? You might notice that even if the mind gets distracted, somehow you know what number you're on. How could that be? So now we can be curious about, what is this mind that's counting? Even when I get distracted, what's the mind that continues the count? If we can just sink back and soften into the mind that's counting itself and let everything else just happen all around us. Not going for perfection here, just a little curiosity. Can I just be the part of my mind that's counting one after the next? We can even begin to drop the count entirely, so long as we keep connection to this part of the mind that is aware even when we get a little distracted. Softening, dropping the words. No need to push them away if they're still coming. No need to continue to power them either. Just sitting a moment in this larger mind that counts for itself, that breathes for itself, that listens for itself. Begin to bring the practice to a close without dropping it all, keeping connection with this larger mind, and cherishing a few last moments of just being there without anything else needed at this moment. Feelings come and go like clouds in a windy sky. Conscious breathing is my anchor. Coming back on your own time, without a rush. Soft, just like the count. So I'm going to pull the crowd on this one. We'll move into a talk now. And if that doesn't work for you tonight, timing-wise or feeling-wise, feel free to peace out. And if it does work for you, great. And happy to see your faces. So I wanted to start. I was seeing if I could get my Zoom poll skills going, but turns out you need to do some more things for that. So I'll just ask instead for everyone, and you're free to put it in the chat. If you want to say it out loud, you can say it out loud too. But otherwise, you can put it in the chat. My question is, in general, what's the most difficult part about meditation for you, about practice? So you might think the thing that you like the least, or when you're sitting or lying down and X happens. What is that? What is X? See, impatience. Thank you for that. Pain, distractions. Yes, I definitely resonate with those. Those are a few of my least favorite things. Getting distracted, too much noise, the aches and pain, being with jealousy, judgment. Right, right, right. Yes, to all of these. So I really resonate with all of those in particular, actually. And the list could go on of there's many unpleasant things that we can experience while sitting. It's a wonder any of us sit. I think we all have our own reasons, and I'm grateful we do. I think it's for the best. But plenty of unpleasant things. And so much of this, including so many of these things that just went in the chat, even sitting still when part of my body aches and I want to shift and release, and I certainly know that experience well. Even that one, and certainly so much of the others, is often a product of our thought activity. And so that's what I wanted to talk about today. And I think it's no secret to any of us that we often come to practice to find more peace and have a stiller, calmer mind. And as we've talked about before, often that works pretty nicely. And so that's great. And so we keep doing it. And that's lovely. And also, most of us here have been practicing for a fair bit of time now and probably had enough time to have the experience that part of the trouble with that is we start to believe that we have a lot of control of what's going to go on in the mind. And we start to think, oh yeah, I'm just going to sit down and I'm going to focus, and all that stuff is going to go away. And I'm going to do this little guided meditation here. And as we know, our experiences often suggest that that's not really the case, but we continue to often believe that. And the kind of remnant of us believing that is our frustration with when it's not the case, because we almost uncover that we expected that it was the case. Otherwise, why would we be frustrated and be like, oh yeah, there I go, not controlling my mind. I didn't expect that. But that's often not our response. We're often like, God, why isn't this thing cooperating? This is crazy. So we have this trouble. And so maybe the idea is that we have the wrong tool. We have the wrong tool to stop our thinking activity. Or maybe another possibility that I'd like to run with is that we have the right tool, but we're still trying to figure out how to use it to its fullest potential. And that might not actually be stopping all of the thoughts and disruptions and desire to move and aches and pains and terrible judgment and jealousy, all really unpleasant experiences. So perhaps it's not actually to stop those things, though that's often why we come to practice in the first place, but instead to become a little more connected to a larger, more embracing mind that hopefully we've started to touch in our practice a little bit. And, this also doesn't need to be some mystical experience of touching some great big mind. It's, I think, something that we all might be familiar with to some extent, of in moments of flow in our life, or in really quiet, uncomplicated moments where get quiet for a second, we might hear the birds, or you might hear, if we're by water, we might hear water flowing, or even something as simple as having a taste of our favorite type of ice cream. It's like, for that moment, okay, it's just this, just that. It might be something also like looking at a person we love, our child or our partner or our parent, and for a moment just seeing that person and having this embrace of, that person is amazing. I love that person. I care about that person. So if we're fortunate, and I think all of us in this sense are fortunate, we've at least had an inkling of what this is about, of what I'm trying to speak to right now, and clearly would never be able to find the right words for, because it's beyond that. So it's definitely been my experience, and I think the experience of people meditating for thousands of years now, there's a pretty good background history of it, tried and true method, is that to some extent, that experience that we all want, that's so embracing and so present, is always actually here, and that it's often as a background presence in our lives. Not that it disappears per se, but that it's there, but it's in the background underneath this noisy foreground of our crazy mind that's going on and our aches and pains. And yet what are all of these thoughts and aches and pains and concepts and abstractions about what's going to happen next? What's the container that all of those things are happening in? So in those few moments where we have this experience of this mind being in the foreground, we kind of have a sense of this. Oh, this has been here. This has been here. This isn't different from my experience. This is here all the time. And that might be a little bit of a leap of faith for you to hear. I don't know. Each person might hear it differently, and maybe it doesn't resonate with our experience. And that's completely okay as well. And I think a different way to kind of prod this or come at this is just to notice in the morning when the alarm clock goes off, unless you're one of those magical, mythical beings that wakes up without one of those things. But when your alarm, oh God, kudos to you. When the alarm clock goes off in the morning, what is the thing that all of a sudden knows, oh, it's time to wake up? You weren't conscious before, and yet something was listening, something heard, something was listening the entire night. It would have heard if the alarm clock went off at 1 a.m. Similarly, if we're walking and we're just in a terrible mood, and I love to walk in the neighborhood, and there's some really sweet cats in the neighborhood, and I might be walking totally lost in my thought, and I feel a little brush up against my leg, and I just soften for a moment. I can't help but appreciate this little creature that wants to come snuggle up and spread its pheromones probably also. But also, it may be in more sweet terms, snuggle up. And so I can't help but just notice that and soften to that. And my ability to be aware of that is there the entire time. It hasn't gone anywhere. It always has to be there. And so that's what we're looking at. And that's what we were trying to look at in our practice today. What's this mind that's always counting? And even if it's not counting, there's something that's still there. It's hard to grasp. What the heck is that? But it certainly feels different than the mind that we might be familiar with. That's the one doing the chatting. Who's the mind doing the chatting to when it's chatting? So that's part of our question. And we get to flavor that larger pool and that larger ground. We get to flavor that in so many different ways with all of these personalities, and sometimes with less delicious flavors like, dirt flavored ice cream when we have aches and pain. That's not a flavor we want to have, but sometimes we have to eat it. And so we get all of these different flavors, but the base is always there. Whatever's being flavored is always there. And so my hope, and certainly my intention in practicing, is that our practice leads us to some different experiences of that kind of mind, and not at the exclusion of these other layers. Not saying, nope, I'm just going to do that. I'm only going to be this big, expansive, broad mind. It doesn't have any thoughts, doesn't have any strong reactions to things. That's all I'm going to do from now on. That would be to the exclusion of everything else. But instead, the practice points us to being that to the inclusion of everything else. So we're that with everything else on top of it. And that we don't actually try to pick out and choose each of those different layers and say, this layer, I don't like that. Sometimes there's an appropriate time for that, certainly. But the opportunity is for us to actually, as we get more of these flavors and more of these layers, it's actually easier to sense that, oh, there's so many different things going on here. There must be some bigger mind that's containing all of them. And so we accept each of these as they come. And I appreciate the words of a Zen teacher who I was really fortunate to study with, to train with, who wrote, "Is it possible that I think, therefore I am, is not deep enough?" So we know about the Descartes, "I think, therefore I am." But he was thinking, isn't that a little bit backwards? Isn't it more accurate to say, I am, therefore there's thinking? If I wasn't, there wouldn't be thinking, but I am, so there's thinking. Not, I think, and yeah, I guess I am, since I'm thinking. So he points us in that direction, that there's something larger and then something smaller within that, that's thoughts. So what the heck do we do when all these thoughts come? Of course, we're all becoming a little more adept at that. I think you all already have lots of tools in your toolbox, hopefully. So I'll say some, but the idea is that each of us figures out what tools work for us. And you might figure out tools that I don't even have in my toolbox. And I hope you share them with me. And in fact, I hope we share whatever tools are most helpful for us in a minute when we open up to discussion. But I know one of the kind of metaphors that I love most about this is actually from another one of my teachers, Jack Kornfield, who kind of frames thoughts as just being the natural activity of the mind. So he says, just the same way that the heart's job is to pump blood and the lungs bring in oxygen and they exhale carbon dioxide, and the liver, it filters toxins. Part of the brain's job is to make these thoughts. And so it's crazy of us to say, oh God, I don't want to do that whole function. Let's stop that for a little bit. The idea is just to have a different relationship with it. But we should know that our brain is an organ that creates thoughts. A healthy brain, that is. So when we put it like that, we can have an expectation of it and even some gratitude for, okay, I guess my brain is working today. It's healthy. There's another story of, well, I'll save that story. I'll save that story for the end. And first I'll speak to a few of these tools, one of which we just practiced, which is just counting the breath and intermittently coming back to, what does the weight of my body feel like? That way I'm not all up here, which is often where we get when we're having a lot of thoughts. If we notice there's a lot of activity that feels like it's going up here. We even use the phrase colloquially. We say, I'm really in my head. And I think that's no mistake. It's because we have the experience. We're actually feeling a lot in our heads. It feels like a computer that's running a mile a minute and overheating. So that's why we come back to the weight of the body first and then come back to the breath. And for me, when I'm totally off in outer space, and it's as if I've just woken back up and I'm like, what am I supposed to be doing? Oh yes, meditating. At that moment, that's a favorite tool of mine to use. So I notice by whatever grace that, okay, I'm somewhere else. The first place I go is right to my tailbone and the weight of my body. And I start the count again, and I just count 10 breaths. And if I still feel unsettled, I just count 10 more breaths. So that's one way to do it. There's so many ways we can count the breaths, and we've done them other ways. You can count the same number on the inhale and exhale. You could just count on the inhale or only on the exhale. You could also count, as I think we've done before, and you might have done with Dr. Patel, you can count up all on one inhale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And that's a different way to do it, which keeps the mind really occupied. Can be very effective. Lots of ways to count. Another way that I think we've also practiced before is listening to our thoughts, literally listening as if they're a sound that we're hearing from outside. And when we do that, we almost override our brain's sense of hearing something, because it starts to realize, wait a second, that's happening in here. That's not a sound that's going on out there. And so we notice what sounds are happening in here and what sounds are going on out there. And that in and of itself can be quite liberating. It's a practice. And again, some of these work at certain times, and some of them sometimes don't work very well. But when we notice that we're really up here in our head and we're having difficulty getting back down lower towards our tailbone, that's often a really useful strategy. We're like, okay, well, I'm up here in my head, but what's going on inside my head and what's going on outside my head? So that's another strategy that we can play with. It's a tool in the toolbox. And then a third that I might suggest for each of us to just try out and see if it works is actually feeling our thoughts in the body. What does this thought feel like in the body? When I think about something that concerns me or has me stressed out, it might be where I'm going next. What time am I getting there? Is there enough time? Am I going to be prepared the way I need to be prepared? Am I going to have gotten done what I need to get done? Even as I'm saying those things, I'm not even concerned about those things. But even as I say those things, I actually notice there's a feeling in my body that starts to emerge. And my chest gets warmer and hotter, and my belly tightens up. And so that's a really useful strategy when we have more emotionally charged thoughts. And often those are some of the most uncomfortable thoughts. So if we're having a lot of emotionally charged thoughts, that's an opportunity to say, well, there's got to be a lot going on in the body if I think I'm feeling a lot of strong emotions, because that's how we often know. That's how we know that there's strong emotions. There's a lot going on in the body. So that's an opportunity for us. There's another strategy we can use for inquiry that's often very difficult unless we're quite focused. So often this isn't a good strategy if we're distracted and coming back, but if we're having a lot of recurring thoughts that we're just noticing and they're bothersome, but they're not overtaking our attention, another thing that we can do is almost split the voice off and recognize it as some specific personality that we have inside of us. We can actually ask, who is this? Who's this talking right now? Is it even me? Maybe it's me. Maybe it's a specific version of me. Maybe it's college football Sam. Or maybe it's relationship Sam. Could be relationship Sam. Or could be Zen Sam. Oh, those people are moving so much during meditation. Unbelievable. It could be any of these Sams. Or it could be somebody else. It could be, that's my coach talking. That's my mom talking when I tried to give her a hug when we were too hot when we were hiking. That's that voice. I know that voice. So we can be aware of, what voice is this? Is it mine? And if so, where's it coming from? And that can often bring a lot of peace for us to say, okay, well, now I recognize that voice. I can almost make some peace with it and be friendly with it. There's a story which, is a kind of a mythological story of the historical Buddha, who was a historical person, a historical teacher, but of course we create these mythologies. And so one of the mythologies is around the Buddha's adversary. The Buddha's adversary is the kind of representation of illusion, which we're all quite familiar with. It's the voice that tells us that we're doing it wrong when we're sitting in meditation. Or that something needs to be different than the way it is. It's that voice. And so, this mythological being is embodied in the mythology. And the story goes that periodically, from time to time, the Buddha became enlightened and, quote unquote, defeated illusion. But still sometimes this embodiment of illusion, the name of this embodiment is Mara. And Mara would come back and visit the Buddha still. So I'd be like, "What's the deal with that? I thought you were enlightened. Why are you still getting visits from all of this craziness?" And so his attendant, his faithful, loyal, loving attendant, would see this kind of scary demon creeping up on the premises and be like, "Hey, Buddha, this guy is here. I'm pretty concerned about it. You want me to turn him away?" And consistently, the way the story goes is the Buddha would say, "No, no, just get some tea ready. Just get some tea ready." And each time that there would be this visitation of things need to be different than the way they are. This is going wrong. You're not doing it right. This meditation isn't going the way it's supposed to be. This life isn't going the way it's supposed to be. Each time, Buddha would say, "Please, sit and have tea with me. Sit and have tea with me." And he would sit just as long as this illusion presence needed to sit there and be with him, and just say, "I see you." And maybe they would chat it up for a little while. And then eventually the hour would get late and this illusion would leave. And that was that until the next time, until the next visitation. I love that story because I think it gives us a different model than we're used to of pushing away or going with these thoughts that something should be different than the way it is, or that we shouldn't be thinking, we shouldn't be having the experience we're having. So I'll close today with one more reference to a great, who's Jalaluddin Rumi, poet, who I'm sure most of you are familiar with. And it's a poem called The Guest House. It's one of my favorite. There it goes. "This being human is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival. A joy, a depression, a meanness, some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond." All right. With that, I'll close. And I'll keep the recording running, but we can decide whether we want to cut it or not. And feel free to say if you'd rather it just be cut out. But I'd love to open it up and hear what strategies have been useful for people, or any other comments to that effect. What you've noticed about thoughts during practice, anything else.
So I'm happy to open it up, and thanks, Sam. It was a lot there. I mean, a lot. This worked on a lot of different levels for me. So thanks for that. One technique I have used is the tagging technique. So tagging, whether it's an idea like this is work related, this is a to-do, this is a process, and just going through that and then letting it, the thought, the idea, leave. But it's a way of identifying it, and it's a way of also having myself understand that I'm actually where my mind is going. So it's bringing me back by tagging it. Maybe sometimes I'm looking for a pattern, but then of course I'm thinking, like, which is what I want to get away from. But sometimes I have fun with that. And just a comment also, because a lot of times, I want to finish the idea, I want to finish the thought, I don't want it to go away. And we talked about that before, like good thoughts but even, even when I'm figuring out something, I go, oh, like shit, I do gotta, I have to book this trip. I know how to do it. And like, I actually want to do it. And it's just stopping myself from doing it because
Mm.
I'm getting joy from doing it, the activity. And it's that real stopping myself, which sometimes is a challenge
Mm.
because I want to finish the problem. Um, and that's a challenge, just to pull back.
I'm just super inspired by the fact that you're noticing, like, I actually want to be doing this. That's difficult to notice. And I'm really inspired by that. I was catching myself in the loop while I was on retreat. You guys know I was just on retreat for a week. And so you think, oh, you're supposed to have these deep, like, experiences and no thoughts. And I had this looping set of thoughts. And I was like, I don't want to be thinking this. I want to be in my, deep, thoughtless meditation space. And then at a certain point, I was like, wait a second, I do want to be thinking this. I'm enjoying this. I'm enjoying this distraction. I'm getting a lot out of this. This is in some way fun for me. And then it changed the feeling of the experience a little bit. There was less tension. And maybe I was able to let go a little bit easier. I don't know if that's your experience, but noticing that,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm actually getting something out of this. That's okay. That was helpful.
Yeah. A lot of times, even with that noticing, it's like, okay, I guess you want to do it, but we can do this later. Like I actually have told myself that, you know what, we don't have to do that now. We can actually get back to meditation. We can figure this out later. Just so it's again, it's identifying it. Maybe that's a tag also. Give
Yeah.
myself permission to solve this later, think about it later, or you know what, we don't have to do that right now. But it's
Yeah.
conscious, I
Yeah.
think.
And that's kind of a form of asceticism to say, like, okay, it's not what we're doing now, and we're done. And another way to do that is also to feel in the body. This is something that often helps me. Then you bring it to the emotions level. If you notice that, hey, I actually like this, I'm getting something out of this, then how does it feel good? And often we can feel that in the body. And so that's a way that I investigate that works for me
Yeah, I
sometimes.
like that.
Yeah. How do I know? Where do I feel? Do I feel like I'm getting something from this? Oh, you are muted, Mom.
I think I'm out now. I was really drawn to the title of the last reflection that you shared. It just, and it really there was like a tie in with that idea, Peter, of the tagging. Um, and so I think about the guests as like they're, sometimes they're welcome and sometimes they're not welcome, and there's just information, there's something I can glean from each of the guests that come, but to know that it's a guest, it's named as a guest, which means it's not going to be staying, and it might be short and it might be long. And so what I have found is sort of ties in then with a technique that I'm finding is working, I think, because for me personally, um, I can be really hard on myself, and then I get in a loop of sort of getting down on myself for something. And so the switch of it is just being curious and kind of naming what it is that's present, to release the judgment and just be present with that. And then again, just it will stay with me, this idea of it being just a guest. I don't have to worry. It's not going to be staying for a long time, but there is something important to know and to have learned, no matter whether it's welcome or not. So that's really what's coming up for me. It was sort of a tie-in.
Mm, that's really beautiful. Thank you for that share.
So Sam, I just had a question also relating to this. Last week, I did a sit by myself. I think it was a 50-minute sit. And it was with the two sections, right? Sit one, sit two.
Sure.
And there was no way I was getting into it, like zero. There was just no, I could not. I just wanted to leave the room. I'm done. And I think I opened my eyes, looked at my phone for a bit. I went back to like, I wasn't feeling it at all. And it was like I was being so stubborn with myself. Like I am not getting into feeling my tailbone or stopping these crazy, I'm just not doing it.
Yeah.
Super stubborn. Yeah. And I noticed that before. I've had this happen before where I just don't want to be here. And I just don't know if that's something that is like, okay, this is something I need to work with. Yeah. And turn that perhaps into, this is an opportunity to really try to figure this out without figuring it. Like, I'm not quite sure how to approach that because I've walked out and I don't know if other people have too. Like, I'm done. This is not right now.
Yeah.
Or let me work through this a little bit more.
Well, one question that I have, because I have my own experience of what you're talking about, but do you have a sense of where you feel this when you have that experience?
Yeah, I'm thinking right now. It's almost like that, very antsy. Like my whole body is just like I feel antsy. So I don't know where I'm feeling that, but right now, it's the chest. It's like I'm getting tight.
Yeah. So right. So the first thing for me is just to notice where those things are coming from. Like what's the center of this feeling of, I gotta get out of here. For me, that's always the first step. I know that experience that you're talking about well, and I think it's interesting over Zoom because I think what you're talking about is one of the formal Zen sits. Yeah, and so there's a different kind of social pressure when we're sitting in community together to not necessarily just walk out. The pressure is very high in a Zen community where the expectation is you don't freaking move. And even in between sits, if you leave the room, it should be for a good reason. Versus on Zoom, and I've had this experience as well, to which you're speaking about, where it's like I'm overwhelmed by my bodily sensations. And without the social pressure, I'm going to turn my camera off and stand up and walk around a little bit. So I've had both. It is an opportunity for practice. Always the most uncomfortable moments are the best opportunities for practice. And we just have to be really skillful about where the edge is, because there is an edge where it slips over into a kind of self-deprecation or a kind of anger at yourself. And that's the moment where it's like, I'm done. That's the stopping moment. I'm not practicing with that. But until then, if we can just sit and stomach a lot of discomfort, for me, that's been one of the most profound experiences, and particularly in that tradition of just sitting hour after hour very uncomfortably. I'm like, I don't even know why I'm here. I'm not sure exactly what I'm supposed to be doing, but that is almost the point, is to just be okay just sitting. That was almost the revolutionary thing. So that's what I would say. And I would say, another way to look at it, there's two approaches. Either way, you should sit with the discomfort for a little bit, unless it's so overwhelming and it brings up something for you that, can't be worked with. But if not, it's good to sit with it for a little bit in the body and let it come in waves. And it might come in 1 or 2 waves. By the 3rd or 4th wave, you can say, okay, it's time for me to go. Or if you're not sitting on a specific timer, you might wait until it subsides and sit through it until it subsides. And once it does subside, sit a few more minutes so you can have a sense of it's not always like that. And then get up and go. And, if you're in a circumstance where you feel like you can push yourself through without breaking something in your brain, do that too. You can do that too. And those are often some of the most instructive and transformative experiences, even though they don't feel that way even immediately after, much less during.
Yeah. All right, thanks. Yeah, I think as I said that, I'm realizing, oh shit, yeah, this is a good opportunity to sit with this like that.
It is. It is, but it, you know, we don't need to take every good opportunity we get, you know. Sometimes it's good to just take care of yourself, because it's also a good opportunity for self-care.
Thanks.
Yeah. All right.
Yes. Thanks, Sam. This was a lot of it is so familiar. Like when you say, like when I'm counting, I'm always good at just focusing on the counting. I mean, I know how to count to 10, but nothing really ever comes in at that time. But I love Trisha's guest mentality of thinking that, oh, if this comes and it's, you know, something I don't want to deal with, it's not going to be here long. It's not going to define, you know, my whole being or whatnot. So, you know, I took a lot of what you said as tips to continue, you know, working on and practicing, you know, to get them to, you know, help with, you know, all these sits that we do.
Cool.
Thank you.
Yes. Yes, and I think that's a good note to end on, unless anybody has a final thing to say. I think it's a good time to stop. It's so nice to see everybody. So nice to see everybody. I'm going to turn the recording off.